I quit keto after 8 years, and these days I'm getting amazing results with a flexible diet. Stay tuned for my 9-month results, plus learn how you can get tips on how to start an easy, flexible dieting plan of your own. Now, before we get into it, please like the video and subscribe so I can show you how I finally got my scale to budge even when keto no longer worked. I know weight loss over 40 seems more difficult, but it really comes down to figuring out your unique fat loss equation. Drop a line below this video and I'll send you the top 3 things I focus on to make my flexible diet a breeze. I promise this simple formula makes weight loss after 40 so much easier, especially for women. Hey, I'm Nissa, and my 100-pound weight loss story was featured in media outlets like People magazine and Pop Sugar. Since then, I've helped hundreds of women break free from fad and yo-yo diets with the same simple macro approach I use to lose 100 pounds. Okay, let's get into my 9-month results plus the easy weight loss tips you can use to get started with a flexible dieting plan. If you've followed me for any length of time, you already know that I was a huge advocate for low carb, keto, and intermittent fasting. In fact, I used all of these tools to help me lose 90 pounds after my first baby, plus another 65 pounds after baby number 2. At the time, I was feeling good since I improved tons of health problems that I thought I was just stuck with. Not to mention, a low-carb diet was really the only plan that ever helped me keep the weight off longer than a few months. While my scale still fluctuated between 10 and 15 pounds while following keto, keeping nearly 100 pounds off for more than 5 years was pretty amazing. And back then, I really thought that keto and intermittent fasting would be my forever lifestyle. Unfortunately, my health did not agree. Even way back in 2019, soon after I hit my goal weight, I began experiencing some chronic health problems. While I'd always been a lifelong sufferer of both headaches and migraines, I noticed they were coming more often, and I also began experiencing chronic fatigue and weight regain at a rapid pace. At the time, I would have never thought of changing up my diet since I had so much success with keto and intermittent fasting. This left me searching for answers, and that search led to a 3-year struggle with both my health and my weight. When the debacle that was 2020 crept up, my health just kept getting worse. Like much of the world, my activity level took a nosedive since even the local parks I like to walk to were closed because of the pandemic. To make a very long story short, by August 2020, I was already back up to 160 pounds. And unfortunately, this upward trend showed no signs of stopping. So I ketoed even harder and I added longer periods of intermittent fasting. But instead of the scale moving down, it just kept going up, no matter what. Now that brings us to 2022. After another 27 pounds of unexplainable weight gain, because yes, I was still following keto, I was still fasting religiously, thus I couldn't understand why the scale just kept going up, so I finally had to throw in the low-carb towel. By April of 2022, I quit keto for good. I also could no longer fast for more than 15 hours at a time without feeling absolutely drained the next day. So after a lot of research, I fell into a flexible dieting plan, only I didn't know what it was at the time, so I couldn't really talk about it. Plus, I didn't know anything would really work after nearly 3 years of continuous effort with pretty much zero results. Now, over the past year, I've spent a ton of time learning about how metabolism works. Good old calories in versus calories out. And while calorie counting was nothing new for me, this time I started seeing keto in a different light. The new knowledge I gained helped me put together the simple and sustainable flexible dieting plan that I still follow today. The way that I follow flexible dieting is I basically start by tracking macros to make sure that I'm in a calorie deficit. I also make sure to eat enough protein in order to boost my metabolism. Now, I no longer follow a strict low-carb diet, although I will say that I do keep carbs somewhat low during the day just because it helps me keep my hunger in check. Now, it's important to note that not all flexible dieters follow this strategy, but personally, after following keto and low carb for so long, I know that keeping carbs somewhere in the range of like 30 to 50 grams at breakfast and lunch, it just helps me keep hunger low. And not feeling hungry means I'm not always thinking about food, which makes it easier for me to stick to my daily calorie budget. Now, the weight loss was by no means quick with my higher calorie approach, but once I was fueling my body with the foods that it needed, which does include carbs, I started feeling much better. Now, just to give you an example of what I was eating when I started my diet calories, they fell somewhere between 1,300 and 1,700 per day. So on average, let's just round it out and say I was eating around 1,500 calories most days. And I was also doing a lot of intense cardio because that was my preferred workout at the time. And it was also the workout that I just thought I would get the best results with. But even with such a low calorie range and daily cardio, my clothes just felt like they were getting tighter and the scale just kept going up. But once I switched to a flexible dieting plan, which mainly focused on more protein plus keeping my calories in a deficit range, and I changed up my workout routine to mostly focus on weight training, I finally quit all of that intense cardio. But since I understand the importance of movements, I definitely kept in my daily walks. Since adding muscle was my new goal, I also added in 4 to 5 sessions of weight training each week. Now this new plan, it allowed me to eat closer to like 1,900 to 2,000 calories on most days. And while most people have to continue to drop calories in order to keep losing weight, over the 9 months that I've been doing my flexible diet, I actually still average around 2,000 calories per day. And at this range, I'm losing about a pound of fat per week. Now, I will admit that when I first started this plan, the scale was not dropping. And if the scale was the only way that I tracked progress, as I'd done with diets in the past, I would have been very discouraged and most likely given up. So the other ways that I track my progress now is with weekly progress photos. I also take a monthly measurement around my waist to make sure that's going down. And most importantly, I track by how I feel because after a few years of dealing with chronic fatigue, I noticed that my energy was so much better and the headaches that I was getting like 4 to 5 days each week really went down to like only 1 or 2 per month. So it made a huge impact on my quality of life. I also track by how my clothes fit. I noticed within like 2 to 3 months, I noticed everything was just fitting much better. Shirts were looser, pants were looser. I was actually going down in sizes, even though the scale didn't really change. But since I added that solid weight training program, like 4 to 5 days per week, this helped me build muscle, which meant the scale definitely moved at a slower pace. But the good news is my body was getting leaner, even though the scale really stayed the same. So don't give up if your scale doesn't move. If you switch to a flexible diet and you add strength training of any sort, it's really important to track your progress in more ways than just the scale. This brings me to another point about how quickly you should expect to lose weight with this sort of plan. When I finally gave up on the quick fix diets that I followed in the past that always promised those quick results, and I instead had patience while tracking the right data, I eventually got the scale to drop. But here's a warning. The scale moved very slowly with this type of program, and that's because I was adding muscle while I was also losing body fat. And to be honest, even to this day, I'm really only dropping around 2 to 4 pounds per month. Part of the reason is I'm still in the process of recomping my body. And like I just mentioned, it just means that I'm adding muscle, which has weight to it, but I'm also dropping body fat, which helps me look leaner. Now, another reason is because I'm fitting these changes into my lifestyle. So, sometimes that means I eat cheeseburgers and french fries and ice cream when I spend a week at Disney with my family. Sometimes that means I take a break if I feel a little under the weather for a few days. And sometimes that just means I need to take a few days away from dieting just to adjust my mindset before getting back into a fat loss plan. So, while a lot of influencers, especially on the Instagram, well, they'll have you believe that losing only 2 to 4 pounds each month sounds like horrible progress, those 2 to 4 pounds, when it's actual fat loss, it can really add up over 9 months. As you can see by these side-by-side photos, dropping from around 182 pounds back in July, 182 back in April to 162 pounds in January definitely made a big difference in my body composition. And since I'm continuing this slow and steady approach to fat loss, I don't anticipate the 10 to 15 pounds of weight fluctuations that I experienced while I was just kind of winging weight loss with a keto plan. Now, I also really enjoy this approach to fat loss because I love feeling strong. So I know that this flexible dieting lifestyle is one that I can stick with for years to come, if not for my life. So that means rebounding back to where I was like a year ago today, it's not really much of a concern anymore. Okay, if you stuck around to learn how you can start a more flexible diet because you're sick of always falling off of the insert trendy diet name here wagon, and you are dreading hopping back on, here's a few quick tips on how I got started. Now, the first tip, start by calculating what you need to eat to be in a 20% calorie deficit for your specific stats. You can do this easily with a macro calculator. I like the one at prophysique.com. While you may be tempted to be even more aggressive at the beginning, like more than a 20% deficit, don't do it. I promise your metabolism will thank you later if you just have a little bit of patience at the beginning. Number 2, you want to download a macro tracking app and use it to track what you eat as accurately as you can. Now, you need to be consistent with this habit in order to know if you're getting close to your target macros that you just calculated. And yes, weekends count, especially since this is the time most people actually fall off track with their diet. Guess what? Most people never reach their weight loss goals. So you don't want to be like most people. You want to stay consistent with tracking, even on weekends, and it will definitely pay off for you. Now, if you dread the idea of tracking, do it anyway. I promise, once you get into the habit, tracking what you eat really only takes a few minutes each day. And the data that you get is so worth the effort that you put into it. So don't just write this off as useless advice because you couldn't stick with tracking in the past or because you think it sounds like a pain in the butt. Number 3, while you're tracking calories, you also want to make sure that you're eating at least the protein amount that you're allotted in your macros most days, if not every day. Now, if it seems like you were given a lot of protein, this may be a number that you have to work up to over time, and for most women, it probably will seem high, just because most women don't eat enough protein. But it is important to hit your protein goal most days, so just keep working towards that goal if it's not something that you're even close to right now. Now, if you are staying under your calorie budget and you're hitting your protein target most days, that's really as much work as you need to do at the beginning. While the weight isn't going to just fly off as promised with most quick fix plans, this is a sustainable method where you should see steady fat loss over time. And even better, you're more likely to stick with this plan this time since you no longer have to follow any crazy diet rules that didn't work for you in the past. One final thing to consider is there's really no reason to obsess about how much carbs or how much fat you're eating. At the beginning, most women can just let the carbs and fats fall into place based on how you feel or based on what you want to eat. While lower carbs do work for some people, but you need to trust me when I tell you that keeping carbs dreadfully low, like, under 20 grams a day, it's not an absolute requirement for weight loss. You can still see plenty of progress by eating the real foods that you love that also might contain carbs. Now, this is coming from a former ketonista who now eats somewhere around 150 to 200 grams of carbs most days while still losing fat pretty consistently. Okay, if you want that link to the macro calculator that I mentioned and my favorite macro tracking app, plus you want to learn 3 simple steps to a flexible diet, drop a line below. I'll send you my guide on how to start a flexible diet now that you'll actually want to stick with.